Hello, dear viewers of the podcast Got in the Motion. With me, the main host, Yavor Ivanov, and with my favorite co-host, Kubrat Ivanov, more known as Kubi.
Hello everyone, and welcome to episode number 30, where we will be focusing on languages, cultures, and the historical parallels between Bulgaria and Ireland. Not only are we doing this, but we're also joined by a very special guest named Bozhil Hristov. He is currently an associate professor of linguistics in the Department of English and American Studies at the University of Sofia, and is also currently a lecturer in Bulgarian language and culture in Trinity College Dublin. His academic career ranges from a bachelor's in English from the University of Sofia and an MSc and D.Phil in general linguistics and comparative philology from Oxford. He has also specialised in Berkeley, UT Austin and the University of Constance, and has a myriad of different publications ranging from a lot of different universities. So, hello, Bozhil, how are you today?
I'm very good, and it's a pleasure to be here, so thank you for your invitation.
Absolutely, and thank you for joining us, because it's always such a pleasure to have people that have specialised and have been so successful in their career and that they're able to provide their own perspective and knowledge. So we learn something, and the viewers also are able to understand a new topic.
It's a good setup.
So, we always start off with this question. It's, what sparked your interest in languages?
Oh, actually, I shouldn't probably say that, but I was meant to be an economist. So I went to an economics high school, and I really hated it. So sorry, but it wasn't for me. It just wasn't for me. And all I loved was just learning languages. So I did a bit of German, English, and then I think it was very obvious to most people, other than myself, that I was going to go on to languages. I was planning to maybe do international relations or economic kind of international business, and then people realized, no, you're not going to do that, and then by my final year I was like, yes, I'm going to do English, and then I loved it. So from the very first day it was just a pleasure, and then it just made sense. Nothing else would have been.
And did you have that passion for languages from maybe when you were growing up as adolescents and just learning and expanding your vocabulary in one language, and then another language, you were prefaced with another opportunity to learn? And has this been an ongoing passion since you were young?
Yeah, absolutely. So ever since, maybe I started at the age of 7 or 8 with foreign languages. Actually, the other good thing is that you learned a lot about your own native language when you learn foreign languages. So that's what sparked it off. And I kept reading, and it just got more and more exciting. Yeah. And you realise you can never perfect or master kind of your competence in a language completely, so it's an ongoing kind of lifelong process. But that's also the beauty of it, because it makes it exciting. There's no end to the game. And
do you ever look back and just wonder, what was I doing at an economics course?
Oh yeah. So do my friends. Is like, you were just not meant for that. So different people. Even my maths teacher. When I was a doctoral student at Oxford, I was in Sofia at one stage, maybe during the summer holidays, and I ran into my maths teacher, and she said, "Oh, are you up to these days?" And I said, "Oh, I'm just doing a PhD in linguistics at Oxford." And she looked at me kind of patronising and said, "Yeah, maths was never yours." And she was right. Maths was not for me.
Like she said, you were meant to be there, not with us, with the mathematicians. I have the pleasure to ask you the next question. What do you normally teach at the University of Sofia, and what are your what you're teaching now in Trinity College Dublin?
Oh yeah, that's a good question. So I teach stuff at Sofia which I find exciting. I think students find a bit punishing and scary. So stuff like grammar, so just practical grammar skills. Then I also do theoretical grammar, so how you can theoretically describe the structure of a language, and that's why I ended up in Trinity, but we'll say something more about it a bit later. Then I teach the history of English, so it's got kind of linguistic structure and how the structure changes from prehistoric times actually, and what we know about these ancestral languages that were the ancestors of most European languages and many languages in Asia, and how you end up from that stage to like with something that we now have as English, Bulgarian, French, German, Hindi, and many other related languages. So that's an exciting subject, but also very challenging. And students, I think, rightly find it intimidating.
Yeah. And just out of curiosity, this is the first time I've heard of theoretical grammar.
Yeah.
How does that differentiate from your regular grammar? What is theoretical grammar?
Theoretical grammar is more kind of the framework, the theoretical framework that you would use to describe any language.
Okay.
So the concepts that you would apply, the rules will be cast in various formats. They can be formal descriptions like syntactic trees, which look like family trees.
Yeah.
You can apply them in order to visualize, let's say, the makeup of a sentence. So that would be a theoretical description with notation. Actually, I talked about how horrible I was at maths, but theoretical linguistics actually relies a lot on maths.
Really?
So I did have to brush up on stuff, and there's some, of course, strands, not all types of linguistics, but some strands would rely on mathematical models as well, and they would use very precise formalisms in order to describe what's going on in language. So essentially, it's a social science, but also an empirical science, in that it tries to say, okay, here is the language, here are the facts, and what generalizations can we draw, and are they robust? Just what you would do in physics, for example.
Okay, that's very interesting. Yeah, because
it would be rightly to say so that because you're an expert, I just curiosity that the main languages in Europe, they're Indo-European languages, I guess, that there is three main groups: Slavonic languages, so based Slavonic, Germanic, and based on Latin. And some are mixed. English is probably mixed.
Yeah, English is an interesting case, but yes. So actually, maybe we can say four major branches. So the Indo-Europeans were. We know they must have existed. Of course, they didn't call themselves Indo-Europeans. We don't have any records of those speakers. So there must have been some group of. Let's say speakers of maybe shared dialects or a group of related dialects. Maybe one theory is we can't really reconstruct exactly where their homeland was. One very well established theory with a lot of support, not the only one though, is that they lived in what is today Ukraine, let's say just north of the Black Sea, and from there they started dispersing. Some went east and south to what is now, let's say, India. Others migrated further west to Europe, and indeed in Europe we ended up with different splinter groups, so to speak, from that original ancestral community, and they would ultimately give rise to Slavonic languages such as Bulgarian, Ukrainian, Russian, Serbian, Polish, Czech, so that would be one consistent group. Romance, you mentioned, yes. There were other languages than Latin in the Romance. Not in the Romance, that would be the Italic. So the Italic group included Romance, the daughters of Latin, and other languages that became extinct. But here we get into history and language, where, when you have a language like Latin, it started as a little dialect that was not significant in the area around Rome, and it spread because its speakers were so expansive in a military way, and they essentially drove out all the others and all those languages, including non-Indo-European languages, such as the language of the Etruscans. All of those,
very interesting. Language. Claudius wrote too. He was very interested in languages, and he wrote 2 books about them. And unfortunately, they're lost. We could have known a lot about the Etruscan language, which is a mystery a bit.
And it is, and there were interactions between them and the Romans, but those languages became extinct for political reasons, because their speakers were less powerful than the conquerors, and the daughters of Latin now are. Let's say Romanian, close to Bulgaria, of course Italian, French, Spanish, Portuguese. These are the major ones, of course, and there are other languages. Then there is the Germanic group, so including German and Dutch, the Scandinavian languages, and English actually genetically is a Germanic language, as you said, but it's a funny mix, because then again you get into history, external history. So the Normans who were speakers of North Germanic, so Vikings. They got assimilated to French culture. Then they invaded England in 1066, and they were very successful as conquerors. Essentially, they ultimately lost their Norman French, but not before it exerted a very, very profound influence on English, and that's why English is such a funny mix. It's got this core, which is Germanic, but there's a lot of French and Latin, so Romance, we can say, influence on the vocab. So that's why English is an interesting mix.
Would be right to say that which were Germanic genetics of the Normans, they brought the French to England.
They did, yeah, and I guess maybe French would have been influenced even without the Norman, influencing even without the Normans, because at some point they got so much clout again culturally, but it was the Normans, I think, that opened.
It's very interesting, isn't it? Germanic people brought the French in England.
Yeah, because I think, maybe I won't be very good at all kind of the dates, but during the Viking Age, Vikings were spreading all over the place. So they were here in Dublin, they were in, colonizing essentially England and France and the
South Italy as well.
So, yeah, all over Europe. And the group that ended up in France and was ceded Normandy, which actually meant Normandy is like the place of the Northmen. Normans are the Vikings, the Northmen.
And the East, they're called Viriagi.
Oh yeah. So they also influenced Kiev and Rus.
Well, which the first king of Russia, if we consider Kiev Rus as a Russian kingdom, they were proud to say, even though they couldn't prove, the kings of Russia, that they ancestors, the ancestor is Rurik, and he was Viriag. I know which is he was normal.
It's quite possible, yeah. And I think I have to double check, so don't quote me on that one. Maybe people will double check. But it is my recollection that a name that we think of as very kind of East Slavonic, like Olga, is actually the same as Helga.
This sounds very
we have to double check though. We should do some fact checking. So didn't trust me. I should double check. So I haven't done my homework. But I'm speaking off the top of my head. But we should look at proper.
That's okay. And the next question is as well. You mentioned just to finish that. So it's Slavonic, Germanic on the Roman group, and what is the fourth one? There is a one small one Proto-Romanic in Switzerland, which is a small language, but it's as well based on Latin.
Retro-Romansh, that would be a Romance language. Of course, Celtic.
Celtic,
the
exactly.
Indigenous language of Ireland, so that would be a Celtic language, so Irish.
Celtic,
Gaelic as well. As Welsh. Breton, and Breton is another cool one, because actually when the Anglo-Saxons in the 5th century were invading what was then Celtic Britain, essentially. Romanized Celts were living in Britain, and some of them just escaped to what is now Brittany, and they were given this place. They ended up settling there, and it was called Breton. So the migrants from Brittany. So Breton is an insular Celtic language of those immigrants. Again, sadly, because of the political situation, it's a language that's a minority language.
Now they speak only, I spoke with some French, they said it's about, and I look at as well maps of how much is spoken, the language is maybe about 20% they can speak in Breton, they lost it really, and not completely, but close enough. And the next question is, thank you very much for this interesting answers, and I'm to be blamed, how can I forget the Celtic languages? Should be crucified for that, but anyway, is there links between Bulgarian and Irish history? And what is the ones you most kind of notice? And of course, you tell us as well what you're teaching in Trinity as well, because it's related.
I see a lot of links, even though kind of Bulgaria and Ireland are two small nations in distant corners of Europe. So one is in the west, the other is in the kind of southeast. But I do find a lot of similarity between the two, and I try to kind of draw parallels between them. Say, for example, if we go back to the Middle Ages, you think of the mission of Cyril Methodius, who started from Thessaloniki, and they went to Moravia, let's say what is now kind of Czech lands,
Czech
or
and Poland,
roughly, kind of
around that.
Central
Slovakia,
Europe, let's say, exactly, Slovakia. And then they kind of started not just Christianizing, but also kind of linguistically influencing that part of the world. Then their disciples ended up in what was medieval Bulgaria, and from there, they spread all over the Eastern Slavonic world and Serbia and elsewhere. So, and there was a similar mission with Irish, maybe a bit earlier, starting in the 4th century. The Irish were very keen missionaries as well. They brought not just Christianity to many people at the time, but also they brought with it writing. So even if you look at, let's say, Anglo-Saxon manuscripts, you can tell that they use this insular script, which is very close to the type of script that is used in Ireland. So many Irish missionaries did contribute to this culture of kind of Christian scholarship and writing. So that's a very, very interesting similarity. And actually the Irish were known for being the best writers of Latin in the Middle Ages, maybe because their actual native language was so different. Let's say in Italy or in Spain, they might have interference from the way they spoke, what was then merging into something different that was no longer like pure Latin. And the Irish didn't have that. They had to learn Latin as a kind of foreign language. That's why it was so pristine and so amazing. So they were really praised for speaking. Speaking, I say, not just writing Latin, because it was spoken as well in the monasteries, Scriptoria, so they used it as a spoken language.
So what was mainly the Irish monks, which were very educated, who influenced.
They spread that all over. Like you mentioned, Constance. That's not in Romania, as many friends think. Of course, there is a similar sounding place in Romania, but that was in the Alps, so southwestern Germany, on the border to Switzerland. And actually, there were Irish missionaries that ended up there as well, founding monasteries and scriptoria that exist maybe to this day. Some of them, others just have historical records, but you can see how active.
So probably that was called Retia, the province of this part.
Probably,
the Latin time, I always go back to Rome, no matter what, my thoughts always lead to Rome.
I'm not a historian, so you know better. I have to say that. Don't trust me on history.
So, I just can add as well that another similarities that I see, it's about how long we were under foreign rules, small countries.
Yes.
They said, but you were 500 under the Turks, we were 700 under the British. But people forget that you were almost 200 years under the Eastern Roman Empire, what was more known as a Byzantine Empire. So altogether, we are the Bulgarians were under foreign rules for 700 years, exactly more or less a couple of years, probably the same period the Irish were under.
And we should, we've been talking about that, and actually we did, and I have to say I'm really grateful to the Bulgarian embassy with their help and with the help of Trinity College Dublin. We organised this event to commemorate the 150th anniversary of the April uprising against Ottoman rule and the 1916 Easter Rising against British rule here in Dublin. It was kind of very interesting, and of course you can look at these events, they're always controversial, right, because there are different angles, different perspectives, and of course we should take those into account and not be prejudiced. But it was a great event, and so many people came. I was actually initially thought it wasn't a very convenient time, it was during the day, not many people could make it. But then it turns out that lots of people turned out, and they were so enthusiastic, and even tiny little things like urban legends. I was talking to an Irish friend saying, okay, in Ireland people just cross the street no matter whether the light is green or not, and that's what they do in Bulgaria. So we'll run the foreign rule. We like to disobey. So, of course, that may or may not be true, but it was a funny thing to say. And indeed, that is the case, that we were under
for a long time.
Under a foreign rule for a long time, but that was the case for many, many other nations. Even if you go back to, let's say, the history, that's another parallel I draw when I teach the history of English, for example. When England was itself under Norman rule and Bulgaria was under Ottoman rule, again, it's kind of interesting also how they looked at their, let's say, masters, overlords, in different ways. And of course, here I judge from a linguistic perspective, but let's say in English, all the fancy words would be kind of Romance derived because the Normans were looked up to and they held these positions of power. And for example, if you compare something like commence as opposed to begin, they're more or less synonymous, but when you say let us commence, it sounds nice, fancy and formal. Whereas let's begin, it's just everyday normal language. In Bulgaria, it's kind of interesting because we were under Ottoman rule, but for some reason, the Ottomans weren't probably looked up to in the same way culturally because Bulgarian did absorb a huge amount of Turkish words, but interestingly, they are very colloquial. They're not kind of high register, they're kind of colloquial, everyday register. And the example I would give to my students would be, say, prozorets, which would be window in kind of normal, formal way, or just as opposed to, let's say, jam, which would be very colloquial, dialectal. So it's kind of the mirror image of what you would find in English. So linguistically, these events have left their mark in interesting ways. So there's a lot of ground to kind of
and
explore.
interesting, we are talking about April Rising in 1876 in Bulgaria and one in Dublin, the Eastern Rising. Actually, the Bulgarian April Rising is supposed to be Eastern Rising as well. But because there was a spies that they gave information to the Turkish authorities and they started to make a lot of arrests. So they said we have to start now, and otherwise in a month time we will be all in jail. So there is another similarity even with the Rising. I know the tactics were different, maybe the participants, the number were different, but again it's a lot of similarities.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I think they both had a bit of confusion at the start, so they kind of didn't go according to plan. Both were military failures, right? Both of them were brutally crushed. And actually their military failure was also their success in the maybe public domain, in the maybe outcry and outrage they sparked because of the brutal way they were both crushed. So maybe that was it. And there's this thing that I talked about where you have this inspiration in defeat type of motive in literature. You have it in Bulgaria, for example, our national novel Under the Oak deals with that. You have it elsewhere. Let's say in French literature, Chanson de Roland, so the Song of Roland is very similar. Recently, I've been and of course the English, because that's the other thing. When you talk about history and events, you often kind of have this danger. I find when you teach these things, when you talk about them, a danger of provoking. Kind of or instilling animosity between people, and I always like to stress to say, okay, it's not nations, it's people, and we should all treat people equally and say we're all kind of the same no matter where we come from. So it's very, very important not to kind of say, oh, we should not like someone just because, let's say, the Ottoman authorities crushed the our April Rising in such a brutal way. We can't just, let's say, treat Turkish people in a bad way today just because it's a very fine line, which I remember my high school teacher used to say, we should be careful. No, we should not be anachronistic and say, okay.
I totally agree with you. But only the other thing is that to achieve this, everybody has to think in the same way, because what I heard in Ottoman, in Turkey today, they teach that everything was really going well, that we were actually privileged to be part of this empire, that we had a great opportunity to rise in the administration, in the army, but they don't study that you had to delete your identity
That's it. Yeah, exactly. That's
so
it.
I totally agree with what you said, and it's true. But as well, they have to be taught as well the other nations what they studying. We're talking about now Ireland and Bulgaria to in the proper way, because you can't just. I a few years ago read a book because I needed history of Turkey, and there is nothing said about the Armenian genocide.
Yeah.
You have to say, okay, we did it. It was terrible. It was me. It wasn't nothing to do with the generation today in Turkey, but you have to acknowledge this awful atrocities.
Oh yeah, exactly. That's I think a very.
How you can forgive somebody if he doesn't recognize or accept the mistake or the terrible doing they did. So. Yeah, but anyway, that's a deep situation. But just to put
it's a fine line between exactly. I think we should be very, very careful about. Okay, of course we have to remember these events and the horrors and the atrocities and honor the memory of all those people who lost their lives and the tragedy. So that's the fine line of keeping that and honoring those lives and acknowledging the brutality and the atrocities at the same time trying not to instill hatred.
Of course, not to spark those hatred. And just going back to the Bulgarian and Irish identity, I had the honor to meet a few times the writer May Binci. She died a few years ago, rest in peace. And she had a lot of friends in Bulgaria, I didn't know, and she told me another similarity said between Bulgarian and Irish people, the humor is very similar, she said.
Very good. That's what I found, very friendly, very humorous.
Yeah. I met just a few days ago a Serbian lady, and she said the Irish are honorable Balkans.
And that's what I realized, even in Dublin, for example. I live in central Dublin, and we think, okay, the community isn't the same as the community would be in a small place, but actually I just run into people. Let's say an elderly lady walked out of her house and asked me to look at her bottle of milk and say, when does it kind of go bad? What's the kind of use by day? Because my eyesight is quite poor. And I said, well, mine isn't great. I tried. And I thought, okay, it's good tomorrow. And she was like very sweet and get very humorous. She said, if you're lying to me, I'll come and haunt you in your dreams. I'm like, no. And then I saw her. And that's the other beautiful thing about Dublin. You just run into the same people. Everything. Kind of walking back home the next day. And I did ask her, how was your meal? But it was okay. And now I'm here, still alive, still in the sun.
So you find this in Bulgaria as well, especially in small community, friendly, trying to help each other.
And that's what you realise, actually, kind of going back to my background, that we are the same, no matter whether we're Irish, Bulgarian, Turkish, French, German, English. It's just the same. We're people. That's what I found when I've lived in so many places, that people are people everywhere. They're good and bad people, of course, but we're more similar than we think. That's why I try to say that.
Well, I give a chance to my co-host to ask you questions because I never stop,
No,
overly excited.
It's a great conversation about history and different perspectives, and even how without admitting of such atrocities and apologising, that I suppose even if it wasn't instilled, that sour taste in those countries and citizens of it, that feeling will always be perpetuated unless the opposing side.
I think actually we are becoming mature about it, and we're coming a long way. So I said that, for example, like this kind of heroic failure and inspiration in defeat is a motive that you find everywhere. Actually, even the English themselves, right? In Anglo-Saxon literature, there's this thing called, or it's a literative poem called The Battle of Maldon. I've been working on it with a postgraduate student of mine lately, and it's again about that. So the Vikings are coming, the Anglo-Saxons know they're going to lose, they are about to be annihilated in battle, but they make a great stand and they say, okay, we're going to die heroically. Just what happened in these other risings that we talked about. That wasn't a rising, it was just a battle with the Vikings in the 10th century. If I'm not mistaken, it's 991, but again, double check the dates. And you see that motive all over. We see it, as I said, in Under the Oak. But also, I think Bulgaria has come a long way. And we've got to, let's say, Georgios Budinov now, who also uses the motive, but he says, well, we have to be careful not to hijack that for nationalist reasons, let's say in Time Shelter. So I think that speaks of a certain maturity where we kind of go back and reassess the past and say, okay, we are maturing as well and becoming more, let's say, philosophical, more critical in terms of our thinking, and I think it's a good thing.
And you don't have to agree, but I personally postulate that there's a fine line between accepting and maturing history, and there is a sort of disseminated approach that I see nowadays. I'm not saying it's the major approach taken, that sometimes people try to forget history.
That would be bad. No, we should
even at one of the events in one of the universities, we met another Eastern European. It was actually a Greek woman, and we were discussing history, and she didn't argue a perspective nor consolidate her points. She just goes, "That's in the past. Let's look into the present and future." And I think that's a very insidious mindset, because if we do that for 1, 2, 3 generations, and you just, even if you have the proof, the relics, whatever evidence it is, I do believe that a sense of nationality and being a nationalist would leave, and it's not towards an extremist way, but towards being proud of your culture and what they've been through. And if, I really don't believe that there has been a country to where they can look back, even the Bulgarians, when you look at Eastern Europe and throughout war times, sometimes we have also breached the barrier and But I think that it's very important that every part of history should be known, shared, studied, and not just swept away.
Oh, yeah, absolutely agree. Yeah, I think we're very short-sighted, because that's the other beautiful thing, or maybe horrifying thing about history is that it also shapes the present, and it's very short-sighted to forget it, and we should not, of course, as I said, we should remember it, the good things and the bad as well. And learn from it. And sadly, that's what I see. Sometimes we just don't learn from it. We repeat it. And there's always this hope that if we educate people, if we talk about the history in a meaningful, sensible way, that would kind of give the next generation more experience. It's kind of shared communal experience. That's what history is about. But sadly, we as humanity don't always learn from our mistakes. But,
and shifting from academic and historical perspective, now we're going towards your experience as a professor. And do you have any favourite personalities that turn up to your classes, or individuals, or certain behaviour from certain individuals that's just like, I like this person, I like this student?
You mean probably I have personalities that turn up probably in my materials. Of course, I try to be objective, and I like all my students, and it's great actually, because we do learn from them so much. So that's the great thing about teaching. It's a two-way street. It's not like us being kind of this profound font of knowledge, and we impart knowledge. But no, we try and share our experience, but so do the students, and we learn from them, they learn from us. It goes both ways, and that's wonderful. And actually, I've been very privileged to kind of have such good students, both here in Trinity and at Sofia, and they've inspired me, and that's why I ended up here, because essentially in Sofia I teach English to Bulgarians, and I've been working on this huge project where I'm trying to finish this comparative grammar of English and Bulgarian, and I thought for that it would be perfect to see what it's like to also teach Bulgarian to either English speakers or speakers of other languages, or to Bulgarian heritage speakers who, like yourself, who grew up, let's say, in Ireland. And that's been eye-opening. It's been quite an amazing experience. But if I go back to personalities of the past and history, let's say there's other parallels. Let's say when I teach the history of English, I tell them about King Alfred, who's Alfred the Great, and there's a lot of similarities between him, I think, and Simeon the Great of Bulgaria. They lived in a similar age. Let's say Alfred was successful in a military way because he fended off the Danes. They came back later to haunt his descendants, but that's a different story. But he was very successful in a military way, but also, just like Simeon, he started this campaign of education and learning. A country cannot just be a country based on its military prowess.
Yeah.
But you have to educate people, and he started this campaign of translating a lot of important works of history as well. Let's say Bede's history, ecclesiastical history of the Anglo-Saxon people, which was written in Latin, was translated in Alfred's time. So very similar to what we have in Simeon's time. And we call it kind of this golden age of Bulgaria, not just because of the military success and the expansion, but I think for me, maybe as a linguist, the cultural bit is even more exciting, because it wasn't just about battles and success in the battlefield, but also culture and being able to support it so that it thrives, and there's a great production of manuscripts.
So we can say the military, if you're strong and your country really have a lot of success in the battlefield, you have a strong body, but the soul is the language, the culture. When I say culture, I mean the translations, this all academic work, if you like. And I think Professor Academic Lekachov, if I'm not mistaken, from Soviet Union, he said that Bulgaria is the country of the spirit because of this. In the context of what you're saying, because he didn't stress how Bulgaria was so strong in Eastern Europe, the biggest and the strongest country military, but because Bulgaria under the Simeon the Great translate and they produce unique as well literature at the time.
And that's a great heritage. Actually, the place where I live in Sofia has a kind of special monument to him, and like one of the streets is named after him. So as a linguist, and also a linguist who likes medieval stuff, I feel kind of very special. Especially
when you're passing there,
my man.
And when you say that you teach linguistics, or that a lot of people just obviously know it relates to languages, but what exactly does it mean to teach? Because obviously it branches off. You specifically teach syntax. Now you mentioned theoretical grammar, and also morphology. How does it branch off when you say I teach linguistics and my students are learning this?
It's a huge field actually, and a burgeoning one as well, because there's so much going on at the moment, and there are many branches of it. So it's just like this blanket cover term for many things. So you can teach, let's say, morphology, which will be about meaningful units inside words, or sometimes not meaningful units, but just units inside words, and how they're built, how we build words from them. You can teach the structure of sentences, syntax, but even if you teach syntax, you can teach it from different perspectives. You can be a very kind of formal syntactician, or a cognitivist who is more interested in how the brain does things and how it affects the way we use language. Or you can start from form and then talk about function. You can be a more functionally minded, functionalist linguist. So there are many strands. There's corpus linguistics, let's say, for example, where you use data from this huge banks originally of language, and now they're really corpora of millions and billions of words, and with computers we can process them. So that's another strand of linguistics which kind of leads into let's say computer science. Another strand might lead into philosophy, let's say semantics and pragmatics might also have links to philosophical schools. Another there's sociolinguistics, for example, which talks about how we use language based on, let's say, our gender identity, our social background, our ethnic identity. So how our social background might influence the way we use language, and they try to see patterns, so that would link up with, let's say, sociology. So linguistics is this really fascinating field with so many facets to it as well. So it's not just one single.
And I'm just curious, now that you've mentioned it, is there a nuance of psychology as well?
Oh,
even
psycholinguistics.
Yeah,
it's called
exactly.
psycholinguistics, where psychology is.
I was just curious.
There's another kind of branch which also has links to psychology.
Because I was thinking about speech impediments. Would that even
Oh yes, There's clinical linguistics as well.
Yeah.
Applied linguistics. So clinical linguistics might be one form of applied linguistics where kind of these speech impediments might be in focus there. Language teaching would be another applied form of linguistics. Translation, and there was machine translation in a very primitive form, let's say in the 1940s, but now we've got these large language models, and that again is based on the work of many linguists. And different linguists have different specializations. So, for example, I might know very little about psycholinguistics. And other branches, so we're very specialized. A bit like doctors. If you, let's say, if you're a surgeon, you might be a knee surgeon, but you might know nothing about, let's say, heart disease. So linguistics is like that as well.
Yeah, that makes complete sense. And the following question would be: which part of linguistics has been most influenced by history, or has there been a specific type or branch, maybe throughout even in Europe? Is there something that's just sort of shows up preponderantly, that's most common?
Okay, that's my thing actually. So that's called historical linguistics actually. And so linguistics actually started maybe on a serious kind of scientific academic footing in the 19th century, and back then all linguistics was historical in the sense of tracing how languages develop. That's kind of my thing. I really like that. And trying to not just do that, but reconstructing. So seeing it's a bit like a puzzle. Trawling and sifting through lots of data and seeing the correspondences, let's say, between Sanskrit, Latin, Greek, Slavonic, Celtic, and not just the correspondences, but how systematic they are. And from that, you can go back in time and reconstruct, let's say, a language for which we have no attestations, no written evidence, like Proto-Indo-European, and that's been really successful. So that was, all of linguistics was historical in that sense, maybe until the latter half of the 19th century, and then other branches emerged.
Okay. And I'm curious, obviously, between the different, I know it falls under, I suppose, the same faculty, but would you have somebody that studies, for example, historical linguistics, say, I was here, my branch was here first beforehand.
I would there be
that competition? Because obviously, as we know with historians, so
I like to, maybe, I guess, well, there might be. Actually, one of the very entertaining books about linguistics in the 20th century is called The Linguistic Wars. So yes, and just like any other branch, we do like to bicker sometimes. And there are wars between linguists of various persuasions. It's normal, I guess. We're human. Academics.
I can't imagine any academic sphere without any comparison between the same subjects.
Although now, actually, historical linguistics is, and maybe has been since the 20th century, a minority kind of little branch. It's only one of many other areas, and it's no longer the case. But maybe I, as a historical linguist, I can say, historical linguists started it.
Exactly.
But that would be kind of petty-minded. So I'll try to refrain from.
Talking about just going back, and I just thought of one small language but interesting language. To which group it belongs to? Just curiosity. The Basque.
Oh, Basque. Oh gosh, that's another thorny issue. So we said that Indo-European started maybe somewhere in. Let's
South
say
Ukraine.
Let's say north of the Black Sea, kind of what is now Ukraine, and then these Indo-Europeans migrated. And we believe that the Basques were part of the indigenous European population from before the Indo-European migration. So maybe they're a little island, and that's one theory, of course. And I think no one has been able to demonstrate any relations between Basque and any other language. So it's one of those so-called language isolates or orphans. They don't have a family. So Basque is not. It's a European language areally in terms of geography, but genetically, so to speak, in terms of its origin, it is not an Indo-European language. And there have been various attempts to link it to other languages or language groups. So far, I think the linguistic community hasn't been convinced by those attempts. Some of them more successful than others, maybe, or more thoroughgoing than others, but none
So
I
it's
dare
still a
say,
mystery.
has been.
we
It's
can
still a
say.
mystery. Maybe to remain a mystery. I'm not a specialist in Basque. Actually, one of the best textbooks in historical linguistics that I also used to teach from was written by a specialist in Basque, Larry Trask. I'm not a specialist in Basque, of course, myself. But I would say all we know for sure for now is that Basque is a language isolate. It has no demonstrable living relatives, although some linguists would disagree, but I think that's the received wisdom for now.
One more question about language. Another came up in my head. Illyrian, Albanian.
Oh, another mystery. We have so little evidence. So modern Albanian, we know for sure it's its own branch of Indo-European. So Albanian is an Indo-European language, but its relationship with Illyrian is very, very difficult to prove because some people say that they're probably the descendants of the Illyrians, but we don't really know because we have so little evidence. So Thracian, Illyrian, Macedonian, by Macedonian I mean not the modern language, but the language of the Macedonians. We have so little left that we can only speculate. These are tiny little fragmentary languages. If you read a textbook in Indo-European linguistics, there might be a section with kind of fragmentary languages, and you see Illyrian, maybe Phrygian, Thracian there. They're just tiny little.
It's very hard to get to. There is no. It's a historian, more should be towards historian, but if you can't completely answer the question, it's not your fault, you're a linguist.
Okay.
But have you ever come across similarity between the two great men, Michael Collins, Irishman, and Vasilevsky?
Well, I know about Vasilevsky for sure from school, and of course every Bulgarian knows about him. But I would not commit to knowing much about Michael Collins. So maybe I'll leave it to you because I
because
haven't
you
a background in history.
You did fantastic. Unfortunately, I couldn't come and attend your lecture about April Rising and Eastern Rising, the similarities, and so on. But when I saw your lectures, and I thought of these two great men, because Michael Collins organized the revolution, the Eastern Rising, more or less. He was one of the organizers, but later on he created a warfare that was very successful. Different tactics than Vasilevsky, but both were involved in finance. They were financing the organization they were found, or within they were already members, like Michael Collins, and also both died, unfortunately. And also they were man of actions, both of them. So anyway, that's why I thought as well it's interesting, because they have similar destinies and them activities and uniqueness of these two persons.
More about them.
Yeah. But that's okay. I'm guilty of it, asking a historical question to a linguist. Not that you cannot answer most of them, you can. And the next question is, any favorite works of literature about which you like to talk to the students?
So many of them. But yeah, I like
Shakespeare.
Shakespeare. I like Shakespeare. Shakespeare is just this universe in and of himself. But also another great name in earlier kind of medieval English literature would be Chaucer. So Geoffrey Chaucer's Canterbury Tales. They're an amazing collection of all sorts of genres from the Middle Ages, and they're just hilarious. I actually remember when I was an undergraduate at the University of Sofia, I went to Sheffield, so that was my first experience abroad. I went to the University of Sheffield where I did a semester, and it's a long story. I don't know how much time we've got, so maybe I should cut it short. So essentially, I had to sign up for a course in kind of first language acquisition. There's another area of linguistics going back to that. But then I realised I'd have to find children and record them and their output, linguistic output, and analyse it. I was like, I don't know many children. It would be weird to go up and look for children. It's like a bit dodgy. I was like, no. So I decided to drop that module because I didn't have any friends with children that I could,
interview.
Yeah, interview and work with. So then the Erasmus coordinator said, why don't you do some Middle English and some Chaucer? I was like, oh gosh, that would be, I can barely speak modern English. How am I going to manage with Middle English and Chaucer? I thought kind of medieval literature would be a bit boring. So distant from us, and then I was so wrong. It was fascinating, and some of the tales were so bawdy and so inappropriate that even a modern reader would just blush, and you realise that again humans are humans no matter where they're from. So they could be Ireland, England, China, Bulgaria. No, they're just human beings. And the beauty of maybe teaching and learning history or early periods in linguistic history would be, if you read these works of art, if you study early literature, you realise that also the period doesn't matter. Humans were humans in, let's say, the Roman Empire, in medieval China, or in England, or in modern day, let's say, Scandinavia. It doesn't matter. They have these human things about them, and that's what I love about maybe reading early literature to start with. And that's what we did.
And did you find it easy to read it?
Oh, it's well, Chaucer actually is okay depending on your proficiency in English. He's manageable because his dialect is kind of not quite the same, but close to a dialect that was then fed into the standard language. So it's kind of manageable. You can get used to it and keep going even as an undergrad. There were other dialects. Let's say the dialect of Sir Gawain and the Green Knight. That would be a different dialect area, even though they're contemporaries. It would be a challenge to read without special instruction and special knowledge of it. But yeah.
Thank you.
And
great answer.
Is it true, or is this a presumption, that in Bulgarian there's a wider range of vocabulary in comparison to modern English?
I think that's the other thing you learn in Linguistics 101. So the first intro to linguistics will tell you that any language, so there are no better or worse languages. They're just different. It's just like us humans. What I was saying maybe about humans is exactly maybe transferable to language. No, so it's very popular misconception. Say one language is better than another. Or one language has a richer vocab than another, or maybe another one I like is one language has more grammar than another. It's just silly things. No, they're different, but essentially all of them are equally able to do what a language has to do, i.e. to communicate. And there is no language that is better or worse than another. So they might do it in different ways. Let's say maybe when someone says let's say Bulgarian has more grammar than English, that would be a silly statement, but maybe if we analyse it, that might mean our Bulgarian maybe uses more morphology, so different word forms to talk about things and describe them, whereas English might use more syntax, let's say phrases and sentence structure would be more important, but one uses, let's say, one type of structure, the other uses another, but that doesn't mean that either of them would not be suited to communication, to producing beautiful songs, beautiful works of art and literature. So no, I would say each language is equally rich and beautiful.
Yeah, and do you have a favourite idiom?
Oh gosh, no.
From any language, any phrase, from something that's just
from
your
Latin
thing
or
that
from
you've remembered?
From Celtic or Bulgarian or...
I don't know about favourite idioms, but I don't have a favourite one. But the first one, now that you came up with this question, which I didn't expect, the first one that came to mind was like all sixes and sevens. That's a good one. I'm not sure it's favourite. It's just the first one when I think of idioms. It's the first one that came to me now. I don't know why. But maybe it describes me more. So that's more about me than.
Okay, talking about favourite things. Any favourite events you like to talk about? Events. Any type of events. I mean, historical, or maybe that linguistically changed some geographic area of Europe, or any events that you think it's kind of fascinate you and it's your favorite.
Oh, again, very difficult question. So let me maybe have a think about it. But I like history. Actually, maybe I'll just try and evade it in a very political, very diplomatic way, because I'm probably a man of kind of small things that change the world, not kind of the big events. Of course, the big events are important because they're big events, but sometimes I like to, let's say, read about history through the prism of individuals, little people who kind of had their normal everyday lives and they experienced big events. So that's how I like to do to do my reading, and I've done that recently. And one example would be a friend of mine whose father recently wrote about a relative coming on a steamboat from in the 19th century from Latin America to Germany, because she was of German descent, and she would meet Wagner and other famous personalities, but they're told, like these events, big events of the period, are told through the prism of one individual, and I think that kind of brings it to life a lot more.
Very nice.
Sorry, I didn't really
I like
answer your
this.
question.
No, I like I like this answer. I mean, I'm interested in the small people, and I think small. They're not small. They're bigger than life, and anything really. And yeah, that's very interesting. Very interesting. Do you think the English can consider as one of the kind of dominant languages in the world now, or maybe the English speakers are diminishing compared, say, Chinese, or do you think there is any shifting in the language geographical areas, or have you come across any statistics or?
That would be hard to say, and it's more, actually that would be an interesting thing again, where linguistics and politics and history meet, so to speak. Because
economics, you don't like?
Economics, of course, economics, which I'm very bad at, exactly. So that's it. And actually, the dominance of English, again, another popular myth is, English is so dominant and such a huge international language because it's so easy to learn, it's got so little grammar. No, that's rubbish. It's neither harder or easier than other languages. It's to do with let's say political influence. Let's say the British Empire in the 19th century was quite influential then. When it declined, America rose to prominence in the 20th century, and that's what brought English its international clout. And it's not to do with any intrinsic linguistic properties that it has. But now it's, I think, still pretty much the undisputed dominant language in the world in terms of international communication. And there's another book I think called Empires of the Word, not of the world, but of the word. And that maybe would be titled, I forget who the author was. I remember I was a postgrad in Oxford when it came out and the author came to present it, but I'm very bad at names, so I apologize to the author. but maybe that would be an interesting read for those who are interested in that. But what I would say, again, maybe evasively, would be that it's not so much to do with any intrinsic qualities of a language, but with the political, economic situation about power. Let's say if you take Latin, which was the dominant language in the Roman world, it's a language in so many cases, such what people say, such hard grammar, quite the opposite of what we have in modern English. But they were both dominant, not because they were better or worse than other languages. No, they were just equally good or bad, if you wish. It's about to do with, not with language, but the power of its speech.
And it's talking about, you mentioned American, now it's more, even the kids in Ireland, including my son and my daughter, and all the generation now growing up in Ireland, and not only, they're heavily influenced by the American English.
Oh yes, of course, that's normal.
Which, is it correct to say, somebody told me, one of my earlier English teachers, that the American English is simplified because of historical reasons. They didn't have money to kind of taught, a language that stay in some secondary school in England, and that's why they were poorer, and that's why the English American is kind of simpler.
No, I would say no. Again, definitely not. I agree that it's influential now, again, because of, let's say, American pop culture, movies, not films anymore, right? You say films, you sound very old-fashioned perhaps, maybe they're movies. And you see, and of course, a language is not just one thing. It's not a monolithic thing. There's no one single Bulgarian, one single English. There are various forms of it. Let's say Irish English, British English, and even British English is just not one blanket term. There are many, many varieties. American. So definitely American is becoming very or has become, of course, probably the most influential variety of English, which is influencing other varieties, that's for sure. So I agree with the first part of the statement. Second part, no, it's neither simpler just what I said. I think it's the same principle. And actually, historically, American English, in some ways, again, that would be an oversimplification. I shouldn't overgeneralize, but if I maybe hopefully can be excused the temptation to say that in some ways, actually, American English is more conservative than British English. For example, in pronunciation, it retains its R sounds. Let's say in car, they would say car.
Car.
Or car, I guess.
Car,
The possession of the car. So that type of pronunciation was current in Britain, and actually in Britain in the 19th century, you find manuals which say, "Oh, you shouldn't drop your R's because that's working class." Now it sounds very sophisticated, but actually, and British people think, it's old-fashioned. It's considered. No, actually, it's an innovation. And in the 19th century, it was looked down upon, and people were told off for doing it. So in that sense, American English is more conservative in its pronunciation. Also, dance. Americans would not say dance, right? They would say dan. Or you can say it better.
Dance.
Exactly.
Something along those lines.
More conservative. Again, this kind of R pronunciation, like dance and chance, would be a southern variant of British English, and of course Northern British English doesn't use that. They don't say dance, that would be Southern. But that's another pronunciation innovation in Britain, in what now we think should be the conservative. No, it's not the case. In grammar, for example, American English is more conservative in some ways. Tiny little lexical way, it retains gotten. Once you've gotten to know those people instead of once you've got to know them. Well, in British English, gotten just dwindled after Shakespeare's time, but in American English it survives. In British English it survives in forgotten. Everyone says forgotten.
Forgotten.
But not I have forgot. Maybe, in Old Lang Syne you have should old acquaintance be forgot. That's an exception, I guess. Not an exception, I should say, but not what is now used in standard English anymore. But in British English, gotten was abandoned. In American English retained. So there are ways in which American English is actually more conservative.
And about what you said in the context, just one more thing for the viewers as well to realize it's some simple fact that I realized years ago. They said, Bulgarian is the most difficult language, or the French person said, French is very difficult. Yes, of course, if a Chinese person tried to learn Bulgarian or French, it will be very difficult, but in the same way for the Bulgarian or French, it will be very hard to learn Chinese. And again, it's come up as well for how, what ability the person has to learn languages, because some persons have excellent ability like you cite to me old English from 11th century. I was to say softly, I was impressed. So, I mean, not everybody has this ability. Of course, everybody has ability for different things, but so, of course, for person who speak French, it will be easier to learn Spanish, or Spanish from who speak Spanish and Portuguese. But then again, for that person, it will be difficult to learn some African language or Chinese.
Well, that's the thing. So here, actually, we have to distinguish between two things: first language acquisition and second language acquisition, or learning. Because now that we're grown-ups, we don't acquire languages in the same way that we would acquire them when we're children. And we just learn them in a more artificial way. We have to be taught the language with formal instruction. Whereas if you're a child, and that's the other thing, it shows you that all languages are equally hard or easy, because no matter what your parents are, let's say, wherever you come from, if you're placed as a little baby in any society, you'll just pick up that language perfectly. And not just that, but you would pick it up in about the same time, which shows you that we have this, well, some people call it language faculty, another kind of thorny issue in linguistics, a lot of controversy there, but they say that we have this inbuilt kind of language acquisition device, they call it, and all of us can acquire language, no matter what that language is. So it would be, because we come as humans with the ability to acquire language, but we're not programmed, let's say, to acquire the language of our parents. No, we acquire the language that's spoken around us. And it doesn't matter what it is, like Chinese or an African language or European language, whatever. But then once we've acquired a language, and once we're older, then we're already primed. So that's why if you say Bulgarian is harder or easier, that would be a relative notion. If you're talking not about language acquisition as the first language, then any language would be equally hard or easy. For maybe we should say easy for little babies. That would be it. But for a foreign learner, as an adult learner, let's say we can't say a language is easier or harder per se, but it depends on what your own background is. As you said, for example, if you're a Polish speaker, Bulgarian will be easier for you than if you're, let's say, a German speaker, for instance. So that's natural.
It's very interesting conversation with you. Really, I enjoyed it tremendously. One more statement I'm going to ask you because you have to come to the end. I don't want to come to the end, but we don't want to tire the viewers either. Would you agree with my statement that language it's a fantastic tool to build a bridge? And what I mean by that is, like, for example, I notice if I communicate with Spanish speakers and come up only with few sentences, a few words, or in the right context I say something, that's constantly break the ice. And it's any another language, because language is used as a bridge, as stretched hands to shake and saying, I respect your culture, because the language, it's part of your identity, part of who you are. And I know some of it, and it's saying, I like to use it to show that my respect. Would you say it's a great tool, language?
I think that's a great statement. I really can't agree more with it. And it's a great way to end, because actually it sums up why I'm doing this. We've gone back full circle to the beginning, because that was fascinating by foreign cultures and foreign languages. Because you learn so much about them, and it enriches you. But also, conversely, you learn about your own culture by comparing yours to others. You find out about both, and that's been my profession ever since. Kind of building these bridges, and I think that's the fantastic thing about languages in general, because you serve as a bridge. Just what I do in Bulgaria. Let's say I teach students not just about the English language, so that they can communicate with people all over the world. That would be, of course, a practical aim, but also about the literature, the culture that produced these, let's say, works of art or culture and literature. And at the same time here, now I'm in Ireland in order to teach, let's say, either Bulgarian heritage speakers or Irish people, or people from all over the world who just happen to live in Dublin, about Bulgarian language and culture. And I think that's just the beauty of it. You are a bridge yourself by speaking two different languages. And I find this fascinating. That's been my life work.
That's why I'm not as good as you with languages, but I always try, and in Ireland as well, especially because I'm living here, to learn a bit of Irish, because I love the country, and it's to build this bridge, to show, to display the respect and love for the culture. And I think your job, it's one of the most important, and maybe will sound maybe a bit strange, but I think the languages and what you do can even help for more peace.
Well, that's what I like to say, because I found, again, I'm repeating myself already now, but I find that no matter the language, no matter the culture, we just realize the more you explore them in different periods, different geographical regions, we're just humans. Deep down, we're the same. We laugh at the same things. We get sad about the same things. We care about the same things in many ways. So that's, I think, my own experience, and many other people's, of course. By learning so much about different cultures and languages, you realize that deep down we're actually very, very similar. And that's beautiful. Like if you read, let's say, an early Latin work of literature, you realize that they were scared about the same things. Like monks, for example. If you go from the Banal and the monastic state, so you have monks being scared and writing these annals and chronicles, let's say, about an eclipse. And even to this day, people might be scared about things like that. Or a monk saying in the margin, I can't work today because I was really, really drunk last night. And then people realize, oh God, so people got drunk back then, they got a bit centuries ago. still people with their strong and weak, sides and weaknesses. That's it.
And to conclude the episode on a more personal note, I suppose, shifting the focus,
sure.
It's that have you accomplished every academic goal that you have set out for yourself, or is there that one or two things that you just really want to accomplish before?
Oh gosh, I'm not thinking about retirement yet, but maybe before I retire, I'd like to finish this book because it's been with me for more than 10 years. This huge grammar book, which started as kind of passion project, where actually I think I'm writing it for myself now. To just make sure I remember all the things that I was passionate about and I want to say. This probably will be my life's work. A book that compares not just the grammar of English and Bulgarian, their structure, but also their origin. It talks about the Indo-European proto-language from which they're descended. So in a sense, I started, it's a bit like my linguistic diary or memoir. I started writing down, maybe initially for myself, all the stuff that I was teaching, I was passionate about, and then it turned into a book. So I would be very happy to see that published.
I look forward to see it because I'm interested in languages and history of language, because we'll be part of it as well. History of languages, the more details about them. So I hope you finish it soon, and I'm sure you will. Even though I know you're extremely busy, but in the near future to finish it, and I'm looking forward to read it.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us today and expatiating upon the myriad of different aspects that we really touched on. We kind of touched on a little bit of philosophy and how you've throughout your 20, 30 years of experience, how you've understood languages and how it ties us back all together. We were able to touch off a little bit of history, and I went on to a more personal level and maybe your interpretations as a professor, to students, to goals. So thank you for joining us today.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
And thank you to anybody that has watched today's episode. And don't forget that if you enjoyed it, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button and the notification bell, and we'll catch you in the next one.